Hey folks, Phil the B-Man here. We continue to think about frames, 9 frames, 10 frames in a box. But the question came up in the comments: what's the deal with wood versus plastic? I use both. So you have here an all plastic frame, including the lugs on the end, and you can see that this one's broken off, but they're pretty tough. Um, they should look like that. And the reduced height of the top bar means that actually you have slightly more comb. You can see that to be strong enough, this wooden bar has to be fairly deep, whereas the solid plastic, is relatively shallow across the top. So you actually get slightly more comb area in a plastic frame than you do a wood. The overall, I would say the ears are tougher. I have messed around with a broken ear like that with putting a metal replacement ear on. You can buy those ears usually at a B store. I don't know if I'll bother anymore now that I can make frames relatively easily. With a damaged ear on a frame like this is a wood frame now, with notice that this ear is missing, this ear is here. I could put a metal ear in. I find those don't slide through my extractor particularly great. So this has got a plastic sheet in it, and I can just pop that out and reuse that part of it. Chuck the wood away. And to prepare it to insert, I just strip off the comb at the top and the bottom, and then it'll just slide into a new wooden frame. Sometimes not super easily because it's got a little bit of thickness to it, but that pops into there quite happily. So you can, with the sheets of plastic, very easy to keep those in circulation even if the wood breaks. Whereas with the plastic frame, it's pretty hard to put that back in action. Cost of the wood and the plastic sheet, not a lot different than the solid one piece. So economically, I don't think there's a big difference. My extractor loves the wooden frames. It'll push those through very nicely. The plastic ones, there's a few points in the process where they're either a bit too slippery or they're a little bit too flimsy. My extractor will have a whole bank of frames, and then we'll want to push against the top bar of the first frame and push them into the extractor. And I'll do some videos on the extracting line when that's all prettied up. That's basically this week's job. So I'll get on that. But what will tend to happen is that because of that thin top bar, it's only got a very small place to push, and so that frame will tend to flip up. And so we always have to kind of make sure that it's not a plastic frame if it's the last frame. And it probably takes a minute to load to check that. Not a big deal. But so my solution to that is actually I like the plastic frames and putting them in the brood chambers, sorting them out, and then having the wood frames in the honey supers. A couple good things about the plastic. I mentioned the more comb area. In my opinion, the ears are just a little bit tougher. There isn't that nail to pull out. It is one solid piece. So in the brood chamber, spring when the hives are glued together and everything's cold and hard to manipulate, you see one of those plastic frames in that brood chamber. I go, aha, there's my in. Because I can lever on that just a little bit more with a hooked hive tool than I can with a wooden one. And that plastic is just a little bit more slippery in the cold wax. And so you can slide that plastic frame out just that much easier. So I like that. But that's the best advantage in the brood chamber. It doesn't do you much good in the honey super, where you're unlikely to pull a frame out. You can, so you get more comb, you can pull, in the brood chamber, you can pull it. The downsides are trying to, that if your system is, the ones that are built for wood and you want to have it be flow, then the wood frames are better. And the wood ones, you can also recycle that plastic sheet. So that's kind of my sense on that. Is nothing wrong with either. And probably for a smaller beekeeper who's just tipping their toe in the water. I mean, the plastic frames are great because everyone's identical. They all have perfect measurements. They're made in a mold. So, if you're starting out and you're thinking, I want to build some of my own stuff, get at least one plastic frame because there's your index to make sure that you're always cutting to the same standard. And it can get you into beekeeping really quick. You could buy these, put them in a box, put them on a hive, and away you go. So for a startup, I think there's a lot to be said for the plastic. For large scale operation that has automated equipment, the wood just has that little extra friction to the parts that contact the extractor, and they tend to slide through and push, but they tend to sit still when they're not, whereas the plastic kind of, it'll slip on one side or slide on the other, and so they just don't flow quite as nicely through my extractor. I don't know, maybe if I had a fancier, more modern extractor, I'd be better off, but I'm happy with what I got there. So, if you've got plastic, please don't throw them away. If you've got wood, good on you. If you've got a mixture like I do, I probably have. I mean, I've bought several loads of 1,000 frames, so I must have, and I bought, when I was at auction sale, and boxes were going 40, 50 bucks a box for 10 frame supers, and then there was a pile of ones that the beekeeper had sorted out all the plastic frames, and the auctioneer couldn't get a bid on them, and I bought 500 or 600 boxes for a few bucks a piece. Fantastic, right? They work just as good. And I'm sure many of those are still in operation here on my farm 20 years later. So that's my take on plastic versus wood. I think it's a tie. And it's probably just user preference that is the difference there. Have a great day, everyone.